What if the greatest economic miracle of the 21st century was a mirage? What if the numbers were fake, the intentions misleading, and the cost global? For decades, the world has watched in awe as China transformed itself from a struggling nation into an economic powerhouse. Double-digit growth, millions lifted out of poverty. The West could barely contain its admiration, or its envy. But what if this narrative, the one we've all been sold, is a carefully constructed lie? Welcome to the untold story of how China gamed the global system, rose to power, and left a trail of manipulation, debt, and deception in its wake. Let's start with the numbers, because as we know, numbers never lie, except of course when they do. For years, China boasted these eye-popping GDP growth rates, 8%, 10%, sometimes even higher. It was the envy of the developed world, a testament to their unique brand of authoritarian capitalism. But if something seems too good to be true, well, you know the rest. See, a funny thing happens when you dig beneath the surface of those impressive figures. You start finding things like ghost cities, sprawling metropolises built for millions yet eerily empty, or infrastructure projects of questionable value thrown up seemingly overnight, all to juice those growth statistics. And then, there are the local government officials under immense pressure from Beijing to hit their targets, even if it means, shall we say, getting creative with the accounting. It's like a nationwide game of make-believe where everyone pretends the emperor's new clothes are fabulous, even though he's clearly wandering around in his birthday suit. Because here's the thing about China's economic miracle. It's built on a foundation of fudged figures and financial sleight of hand. It's a house of cards, meticulously constructed to project an image of unstoppable growth, while masking the very real risks lurking beneath. Now let's talk trade, shall we? Because nothing says global player like joining the World Trade Organization, which China did back in 2001. They promised open markets, a level playing field, all that good stuff. What they delivered, however, was something else entirely. Imagine a tsunami of cheap goods flooding across borders, undercutting everything in their path. That's essentially what happened. Western industries, from manufacturing to textiles, were decimated, unable to compete with China's artificially low prices, often propped up by government subsidies and other shady practices. Meanwhile, on the other side of the equation, good luck trying to get your products into China. They promised open doors, but what they actually built was a labyrinth of non-tariff barriers, bureaucratic hurdles, and blatant discrimination against foreign companies. Oh, and let's not forget the currency manipulation, keeping the yuan artificially low to give their exports an unfair advantage. Free trade? More like a one-way superhighway with China in the driver's seat running over everyone else in its path. So, we've established that China's not playing by the rules when it comes to trade, but it gets worse. Because while the West was busy innovating, pouring billions into research and development, China was busy, well, copying. We're not just talking about knockoff handbags and fake Rolexes here, folks. This is industrial-scale intellectual property theft. Military technology, pharmaceuticals, AI algorithms, you name it, they've nicked it. Companies entering the Chinese market were often forced to hand over their trade secrets as the price of admission. Others fell victim to sophisticated cyber attacks, their intellectual property spirited away through the digital ether. The scale of this theft is staggering. In 2018, the FBI estimated that China was responsible for the largest transfer of wealth in human history, surpassing even the plunder of empires past. They've built their economic powerhouse on a foundation of stolen ideas, a monument to plagiarism on a global scale. Now let's talk about China's grand geopolitical strategy, because every aspiring superpower needs one of those. Enter the Belt and Road Initiative, a sprawling network of infrastructure projects spanning the globe, all funded by generous loans from Beijing. Who wouldn't love shiny new ports, roads, and airports, right? Well, here's the catch. These loans come with strings attached, lots of strings. Countries like Sri Lanka, lured by the promise of easy money, soon found themselves drowning in debt, unable to repay their Chinese creditors. And when they couldn't pay up, well, that's when things got really interesting. China swooped in, like a benevolent vulture, and took control of those strategic assets. Ports, power plants, even entire islands. All as collateral for unpaid debts. It's not aid, folks. It's a debt trap, a way for China to extend its influence, project its power, and reshape the global order in its image. one strategically placed loan at a time. The year is 2020, the world changes. A novel coronavirus emerges in Wuhan, China, but instead of transparency and international cooperation, what did we get? Silence, suppression, misinformation. Early warnings from doctors and whistleblowers were silenced. Data was manipulated. The true extent of the outbreak hidden from the world. The World Health Organization, influenced by China, delayed declaring a global health emergency. And while the rest of the world scrambled to respond, China was busy hoarding PPE, securing its own supply lines and controlling the narrative. The virus wasn't just a biological threat, it was a geopolitical weapon. China used the pandemic to its advantage, exploiting the chaos to advance its interests, silence critics, and tighten its grip on power. And the world, caught off guard and desperate for answers, was all too willing to play along. Inside China, censorship is a fact of life. The Great Firewall blocks access to the outside world, social media is tightly controlled, and dissent is swiftly silenced. But what's happening beyond China's borders is perhaps even more insidious. Chinese state-run media outlets have been quietly expanding their reach, buying up ad space in Western newspapers, setting up seemingly independent news websites, and spreading their propaganda far and wide. Social media platforms like TikTok, owned by Chinese companies, are censoring content deemed politically sensitive, even for users outside China. Hollywood, eager to tap into the lucrative Chinese market, self-censors its films, removing anything that might offend Beijing's sensibilities, from Taiwan flags to depictions of the Dalai Lama. It's a slow, subtle form of influence, but no less insidious for it. China is exporting its censorship model, seeking to control the narrative not just within its borders, but globally. So how did we get here? How did China manage to pull off this global deception, this grand act of geopolitical sleight of hand? The answer, I'm afraid, is both simple and deeply uncomfortable. We let them. Western corporations, blinded by greed and the allure of cheap labor, turned a blind eye to China's human rights abuses, its intellectual property theft, its disregard for international norms. Governments, eager to maintain access to China's massive market, were all too willing to overlook their transgressions, to prioritize short-term economic gain over long-term strategic considerations. And China, well, they played the long game. They knew the West's weaknesses, its addiction to cheap goods, its short attention span. They played us like a fiddle, and we danced to their tune. But the music is changing. The world is waking up. The cracks in the facade are starting to show. Countries are starting to push back against China's predatory lending practices, its intellectual property theft, its aggressive expansionism. Factories are moving out of China, seeking safer havens in Vietnam, India, Mexico. Governments are enacting stricter trade policies, imposing tariffs, scrutinizing Chinese investments. The US, under the Trump administration, launched a trade war. And while the Biden administration may be taking a different approach, the underlying tensions remain. The European Union, long complacent, is finally starting to flex its muscles, labeling China a systemic rival. Australia, Japan, India, and others are strengthening their alliances, seeking to counter China's growing influence. The game is far from over, but the balance of power is shifting. The question is, can the world untangle itself from the web it helped spin? Can we build a new, more equitable global order, one that doesn't reward bad behavior and punish those who play by the rules? The answer, my friends, is up to us. Look, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by all this. The scale of China's deception, the complicity of the West, the sheer audacity of it all. It's enough to make you want to crawl under your weighted blanket and never come out. But here's the thing. We can't afford to give in to despair. We can't afford to be passive observers in this unfolding drama. The future of the global order, the very principles of free trade and fair play are at stake. We need to hold China accountable for its actions, for its broken promises, for the damage it has inflicted on the global economy and the rules-based order. We need to demand transparency, fairness, and a level playing field. And we need to do it together, because the only thing worse than being cheated by China is letting them get away with it.